Hi everyone. This week we're studying doors and windows. The first thing I want to do is continue our discussion of framing from last week and talk about how to make an opening in your wall framing in order to put in a door or a window. And dig a little bit deeper into that, we'll talk about the headers that need to go above your doors and windows. Finally, I want to cover how to frame a pocket door because this seems to be a confusion for many students. So we'll take a closer look at that. On your screen, you see the same exhibit from your textbook on how to frame a wall. Last week, we learned about the bottom plate or sole plate, the wall studs, and the double top plate. Okay. This week, we're going to focus on this part right here where you're framing a window. And what we've got here is an opening in the wall. It will have a header above the opening, and that's to carry any of the weight that's coming down from the wall above it. Could be the weight of the roof above, could be maybe a second story. Okay, there's some structural load coming down that wall. And so what it does, this header does, is to carry that load and spread it to the sides and down to these studs here, okay, on each side. So the studs over here have special names. The full height one is called the king stud. This shorter one that only goes to the top, under the header is a trimmer stud. Don't worry too much about those. There's a lot of names for different types of studs that aren't super critical for you to learn. The one that I do want you to learn is any stud that is shorter than full height is called a cripple stud. So let's take a look at a different example of wall framing. I'm going to focus on this window first. And right here we have the header above the window. And underneath the window, by the way, this is called the rough sill, right? And it's what your window piece is actually going to sit on, all right? So that doesn't actually carry any weight except for the weight of the window itself, the window frame and the window glass. It's called a rough sill because there's a finished sill later, which is the piece that you can actually touch when you're standing inside that room. Let's look at the door over here to the left. The door is going to be framed almost the same as the window. Here we go. We've got the header up above. And the big difference is, of course, that it doesn't have a bottom sill. And I'll also notice that the bottom plate for the wall construction stops. Okay, so you can have free passage through this door. Now these are fairly small headers right here, so there's actually a gap, and that's what these little cripple studs are above, just to fill that gap and give you something to nail your sheetrock. But there's another way you can frame this, and because sometimes these little pieces of wood are not they're not easy to work with, right? They're just so small. And so you can actually install a header larger than necessary. It's called an oversized header, and just fill that area. Okay. A little bit of extra material, but it's actually easier to construct. You might see that sometimes. Let's take a look at the same framing system, only now you can see some of the finish materials that are going to go on there also. So right here, I'm just going to outline this. We have a wall. This happens to be an interior wall of a home. And so you've got the sole plate, you've got the studs, and here is the top plate of your wall. Now here is your opening in the wall. We'd like a door in between these two rooms, please. Thank you. All right. And so it's got a header above the door. And it's got a little cripple stud to fill that area right here. And what you can see is the sheetrock or drywall, here's the kind of the back piece on the far side of this stud wall, and here's one on the near side, so closest to us. So you can see how that wall will be finished on both sides. There's also an exterior wall in this image, so let me walk you through that. This piece over here is an exterior wall. And so we can see the wall studs. There will be a bottom plate in there. We can't see it right now. And then there's the wall studs, and here's the double top plate. But let's take a look at the finish. On the inside, inside of the home, here's a drywall finish. On the outside of the home, so on the other side of the studs, is a plywood sheathing. They're using an air barrier, keeps air and water out of your home. And in this case, they're showing a wood siding. So the exterior finish on this wall is a wood siding. One last thing in this picture, in between the studs, we're showing some insulation. So you can see that that cavity in the wall can be put to some good use and put some insulation in there. So let's take a closer look at this header piece. On the left here, you see the same door framing layout that we've looked at. Okay. But if you get closer into this header, you can see that what we've got is a double 2x header with a 1/2-inch plywood spacer. And this is really, really common for any 2x4 wall. And why is that? It's because, if we take a look at this piece in section here, remember that a 2x4 is 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So if you add up 1.5 inches for one, 1.5 inches for the other, you're going to end up with 3 inches. But your wall is 3.5 inches wide. So this wall right here, 3.5 inches wide. And it's far, far easier to work with these headers if they flush out on either side with the rest of the wall framing. So therefore, by adding an extra 1/2-inch plywood spacer right down the middle, okay, we're adding some ease of constructability for these headers. So this is how they're commonly built. Your headers can come in different sizes. They get deeper as you need more strength for a wider span. So if you compare these ones, a double 2x4 header can span about 4 feet. Okay, so that's really common for just a door or a small window. But it can go all the way up to a double 2x12 header, so that's quite a bit deeper. All right, can span 8 to 10 feet in a one-story home. So a full, large double door, for example, or a series of windows. So we just talked about a typical header detail for a 2x4 wall, but it turns out that here in California and across the country, most exterior walls are built with 2x6 framing, and that's so that you have a deeper cavity in order to put more insulation. So how do you build a header for a 2x6 wall? It's a slightly more complicated construction. Here's the 2x4 wall to compare. We've got a double 2x with a 1/2-inch plywood spacer. But a 2x6 wall, you have 5.5 inches to take care of instead of 3.5. So what we do is put a 2x6 horizontally at the top and the bottom, and then we have our double 2x header in between, kind of sandwiched in between. And that gives us this extra gap or an extra space. So we'll often put some insulation in there. Now, this was the best illustration that I found of a 2x6 header, clearly drawn, but for some reason it's upside down. All right. So So here you go. I flipped it over for you so you can see kind of a more typical orientation because, of course, this header is above a door. So there's wall above it. So what we've got here is our double 2x header. It's the same structural piece that would be in a 2x4 wall, only now it's sandwiched at the top and bottom by this 2x6 turned horizontally, leaving a big gap or a void here in which it's kind of an opportunity to place some insulation. Here is the wall above your door, and remember that there's insulation in that cavity also. And I've drawn down here what that door frame might look like because we're cutting through. Here is a door frame with the stop right there. Here is a trim on the exterior and a trim on the other side also. This piece right here is the actual door in the closed position. Okay, so in this video we talked about how to frame an opening in your wall for a door or a window. And then we went into some more detail about the headers that would go over that opening.